Hello and welcome to a look at Cruise for a Corpse for the Amiga, a game that was developed by Delphine Software and released by US Gold. The introduction is somewhat set up the plot, but you could always ask yourself why a police inspector would be invited to join a cruise on a rich man's ship. That can be explained by a scenario that is described in the manual, whereas Inspector Lucentia, if my pronunciation is wrong, I do apologize, my French is woefully inadequate. He arrests a bunch of people in a very posh cafe in Paris based on some information given by an informant. The information, of course, turns out to be inaccurate, and one of the individuals he ends up arresting is Nicholas Carvajan, who claims to various reporters that he holds no grudge against the police because, of course, they are trying to do their job. It is very easy to imagine that the invitation extended to the inspector has been based around Nicholas trying to say, you know what, crap happens, life goes on, come and enjoy a holiday. But as we saw in the introduction, Nicholas Carvajan is rather dead. And before the inspector had a chance to examine the corpse, he was knocked out from behind and wakes up in Carbajan's office on board the ship. Why anyone would be foolish enough to commit a murder on a ship they can't get away from when an inspector has been invited to join the cruise is questionable, but it is the theme of many a mystery novel, which is quite clearly the inspiration behind this game. As you can likely gather, this game is a point-and-click adventure mystery solving thing, and as such you have to go around and point and click on just about everything that looks point and clickable and interact with it in various different ways in order to get information about whether this object or item is of importance or not. On top of that, you will also have various different individuals on board the ship that you can speak to and question and gather information from. Once you have gathered information from one individual, you may have to return to that individual later on when you have spoken to someone else who has some juicy secrets about that person that you will have to confront them with. For some bizarre reason, a reformed alcoholic is not necessarily overly keen on talking about said things, and an accused gambler is not likely to be very approachable about that subject either, but it gives you background information about the characters. But it also sets up potential perpetrators, of course, because a gambler could be in debt. A somewhat reformed alcoholic could perhaps be having a few drinks and knowing that there is some animosity between that individual and the victim. It is easy to imagine that that person in a drunken fit could decide to get rid of the person that they are having an issue with. So the different characters you bump into quickly turns out that most of them will have a motive and ability to have committed the crime, which of course always makes solving it that more interesting. The setting of this point and click mystery adventure, of course, is on board a ship which is currently sailing. So the gameplay area is somewhat limited and restricted, but while that might easily be a downside, I actually think it enhances the gameplay experience. You are operating on a somewhat strict timer because you have from 8 o'clock in the morning until the time it takes for the ship to reach port to solve the mystery and find the perpetrator. And every time you solve a puzzle correctly, the time is being progressed. Let us talk technical aspects. From a graphical point of view, and bear in mind, of course, this is a game from 1991, the general opinion of this game is that it is rather splendid looking, and I see no reason to disagree with that point of view. The setting is on board a ship, of course, in 1927, and the period seems to be reproduced quite accurately. Not that I'm an expert in that time period, but it looks believable, and the level of detail is fitting for the scenario, and by and large, the graphics are very, very nice. The characters, when moving around on the ship, are polygon based, but in conversations are hand drawn with a touch of animation going on. The polygon thing can perhaps seem a bit odd, but considering the fact that characters can move in and out of the screen, moving towards and away from the camera, having a polygon-based system makes it much easier to stretch and contract the polygons without the character losing form. Something that would be somewhat more time-consuming and wonky to do with a sprite-based system. It works perfectly well, and it may seem to be a bit odd, but yeah, as I said, it works. When it comes to sound effects, they do what they need to do, and nothing much more than that. You have the expected sound effects as for doing various things, such as knocking on a door or moving an object or whatever else you might be doing. The sound effects are not exceptional, but they are perfectly fitting for the scenario and for the setting of the game, so no complaints there. The music is considered to be of an excellent nature, and for me personally, particularly the title tune, I find very, very enjoyable. Many of the different rooms on board the ship have their own unique tune, and you may not be the greatest of fan of the style of the different tunes, but they are, again, fitting for the setting and the scenario, and they all add to the general atmosphere of the game. And yeah, I have absolutely no complaints at all about the music. It is definitely a question of whether you like the style or not. When it comes to controls, they are perfectly responsive. You use the mouse to navigate around and click on various items, and then when you click on an item, there will be a menu popping up showing you how you can interact with a said item. Right click will open the menu so you can check out your inventory, and if you need to interact with an item and another item or a person, the interaction is very, very simple and very, very easy to understand. Something that has been mentioned is that the level of interaction required can be a bit superfluous. The piece of paper we picked up at the early stages of this game, in many another point and click adventure, you would pick up the piece of paper and then read it, but in this game I had to unfold it first so you could actually read it. For some people, that may be a bit cumbersome, but you know what? It gives the game its own personality that you have to go through these extra small annoying steps. The different characters on board the ship are likely somewhat stereotypical, but referring to the fact that this game is very heavily inspired by murder mystery books and novels, and anyone who's an avid reader of said novels and mystery books will know that for this period, the characters used in those stories are mainly stereotypical. So, as such, the game hits the mark on the theme that it is inspired by. So, yeah, I have no issues with the characterization at all. When it comes to point and click adventures, if I was to say think of a point and click adventure from the early 1990s, I'm sure that a lot of people would immediately think Secret of the Monkey Island, the absolutely excellent and legendary title from LucasArts. But of course, other titles would likely also pop up, such as Beneath a Steel Sky, Curse of Enchantia, and Simon the Sorcerer, which I'm a bit ambiguous about, but that might be covered, so I'll save it for that moment. But in a crowd of titles like that, Cruise for a Corpse could likely easily disappear. And that would be a shame, both for the game and for people who enjoy point and click adventures. The game is very well written, and while it contains a certain amount of humor, it is controlled humor to avoid it being slapstick like, which of course would completely and utterly demolish a serious scenario as the foundation of this game is. Solving the mystery and solving the puzzles can be challenging, but there's no wonky logic in this game. You don't find rubbish such as use a piece of flint on a chicken in order to boil the egg inside the chicken in order to throw the egg at a doorbell to prevent the doorbell from making a noise when you open the door kind of crap. All the puzzles are logical. They may not appear logical before you've solved them, but then the logic will become obvious, and I praise this game no end for having logic puzzles and not bizarre wonkiness, which an awful lot of adventures, both point and click and otherwise, was prone to throw in order to extend the experience for the player because they had to think so far out of the box they were in a different game. It's not all good though. You have to replay this game if you are not familiar with it or not using a solution because you progress time when you solve a puzzle. Meaning, of course, that if you end up in a position where you solve several different puzzles, you can progress the time past a certain point where you should have been witness to a conversation or something similar, effectively putting it into the dreaded dead man walking scenario. Meaning, of course, that you can't actually complete the game and you are not necessarily made aware of it. So, by replaying the game, you will eventually learn that you may have to solutions to certain puzzles, but you will have to do them in a somewhat strict order. As with every other game that's ever been made, there's an awful lot of caveats to cover. If you're not a fan of point and click, if you're not a fan of murder mysteries, if you're not a fan of the setting or the scenario or whatever else, then this game has nothing to offer. Should you, however, be a fan of either of before mentioned components or all of them, you can't really go wrong with Cruise for a Corpse. It can be frustrating, it can be annoying, but ultimately, once you manage to solve the puzzle and have the evidence to back your accusation of the perpetrator, it will give you a sense of fulfillment and satisfaction for having beaten it. This game was very highly praised by the gaming press at its time of release, and for once, I will actually fully agree with them. This is a rather excellent title. On that note, thanks for watching. Take care. See you next time. Bye bye for now.